Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. And welcome to this edition of the Prashad Report. Now joining us is Vijay Prashad. Vijay Prashad is the Edward Said Chair at the American University of Beirut. And his most recent book is The Poorer Nations, A Possible History of the Global South. Thank you for joining us, Vijay.
Thank you so much.
So Vijay, today marks the 3rd anniversary of the intervention in Libya. What exactly are your thoughts?
Well, it's very hard to have a simple, statement about the Libya intervention, about what has happened in Libya over the past 3 years. As you know, I was very much opposed to the NATO intervention, but of course, I am 100% for the Libyan people. The outcome of what happened 3 years ago has been quite catastrophic for the Libyan people. But I think it would be unfair or maybe not judicious to pin the entire blame on what has transpired over the past 3 years on the NATO intervention itself. Of course, it's true that NATO intervened. It had a certain, interest in how it intervened. It attempted to put its political people in charge in Libya. And I think that was one of the major reasons for the enduring political crisis in Libya. But there are also older fissures that have continued to, I think, bedevil the country. So it's worthwhile, I think, looking not only at the political crisis, but also at some of those older fissures that this political class that's come into being after the NATO intervention has not been capable of addressing. I mean, the political crisis is really the central issue. What's happened is that these spectacular incidents, such as the seizure of a oil tanker off the coast of Libya by US Navy SEALs, captures the attention of the public. But I think the more important issue is what's happening inside the General National Congress, the main legislative body in Libya. This National Congress was meant to give up its mandate in December. It refused to do that. It extended its mandate for another year. It's trying to hold on to power. There's a sense that it's not democratic at all. Not only vis-a-vis the people who so-called elected it, but vis-a-vis the many issues that have been raised by the public. This National Congress has in many ways suffocated any attempt at growing civil society. Anytime minority groups have asked for their language questions to be taken up, such as the so-called Berber or the Amharic population that are in the northwest of the country, this General National Congress has subdued their claims, and has lost, I think, important allies. So this is one major issue. And, you've seen over the course of the past year, armed militia groups enter the Congress, threaten Congress people with their lack of legitimacy, and indeed threaten them to such an extent that the Congress recently abandoned its own building and moved into a 5-star hotel where they felt there was more security. I mean, things have gotten so bad that about 10 days ago, last Tuesday, in fact, the Prime Minister of the country, that is the man who heads the legislative body, the Congress, fled Libya in the middle of the night. Mr. Ali Zaidan took a private plane and went to Europe. This political crisis has not been solved, and it's not been helped at all by the external actors who have been emboldened in Libyan politics as a result of the NATO-Gulf Arab intervention. They've brought their own battles into Libya so that they've pushed this Congress to go after the Muslim Brotherhood. This is the major agenda of Saudi Arabia at this time. And this is, of course, a short-sighted thing, because whereas in Tunisia or in Egypt, the state has been stronger and has been able to withstand this attack against the Muslim Brotherhood, in Libya, this has made the state even more fragile. I mean, if you take this political crisis and expand it now eastward, the east of the country, where 2/3 of the oil resides, has attempted to get not autonomy, not independence, but over the course of these 3 years, a greater deal for the amount of oil, for the wealth that comes into the country. And because they haven't been able to craft a deal with a Congress that they see as nepotistic, as a den of thieves, as it were, the factions in the east, the militias in the east, have been stopping oil pipelines. They've been creating major havoc at the transfer stations, and most recently in the province of Barca, they took over the main port, where they have decided to, basically capture ships and load this oil on and send it out to the market overseas. It was one of those ships that was kidnapped at high sea by the Navy SEALs. So this oil question in the East compounds the political crisis, but is not actually the author of it. The oil is not the issue here. The issue is there has been no developed political institutions. There's been no allowance to develop civil society. And this, by the way, is made even more clear as a consequence of the NATO intervention, because NATO intervened, and in such a way, with such heavy aerial bombardment, it did not even allow or want, perhaps, the militias to form into a coherent army. So what happened was the militias, which were city-based, which were town-based, remained extant. They remained separate. There was the Misrata militia, militias of Benghazi, militias, of the different towns and cities of Ras Lanuf, etc. These militias were never under one unified command, and they remain over the course of these 3 years as a force out of control of the central authorities. Militiamen get a stipend, they get paid by the government, but they're not under its control. This is a very poisonous consequence of the way in which NATO intervened. And by the way, NATO's favored general, General Khalifa Hifter, who used to live 15 minutes away from the CIA headquarters, in Vienna, Virginia, who was parachuted into Benghazi with the hope in March of 2011 that he would be able to take command of the revolution, remained on the sideline and has recently attempted a coup d'etat. Mr. Hifter, who claims to have some support in the East, is now going to create even more mischief, I fear. So the central takeaway 3 years after the NATO intervention is that the grammar of that intervention greatly challenged the Libyan people's sense of a political future, and the regime that has come as a consequence of that NATO intervention certainly hasn't helped clear up any of the political problems in Libya that, of course, preceded the NATO intervention, but has been deepened into crisis by that intervention.
All right, Vijay Prashad, we always appreciate your analysis. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.